it's Dua Lipa, and I'm at your service. Join me as I serve up personal conversations with my sensational guests.
Dua Lipa interviews Tim Cook.
Technology doesn't want to be good or bad. It's in the hands of the creator.
It's not every day that I have the CEO of the world's biggest company in my living room.
If you're looking at your phone more than you're looking in someone's eyes, you're doing the wrong thing.
Dua Lipa at your service. Listen to all episodes on BBC Sounds.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Wake Up to Money from BBC 5 Live.
Hello, morning, welcome to Wake Up to Money. A big question of late, how do we jumpstart the UK economy? We're going to dig into a latest report looking at trying to do just that. Also on the programme today, you heard of Huel. If you haven't so far, I'm sure you will soon. We'll digest all there is to know about the nutritional shakes maker.
In the UK, you'll see us about 40 to 50% of UK stores will have some Huel bottles in there.
And we'll be unwrapping the annual streaming stats trend, taking over your feeds.
Wake Up to Money with Will Bain.
Yeah, morning. Welcome back to Wake Up to Money on Monday, the 4th of December, just gone 5 o'clock in the morning. Will Bain with you again. Thanks for kicking off the start of your week, the start of December. Wow, it's come around quickly, hasn't it? Christmas racing up to us, ready or not. Certainly not ready at my end when it comes to the Christmas shopping. We'll be picking through that, I'm sure, because it's a big part of some of the trends going on in the economy. Also, as we were mentioning there, are you a Spotify user? Have you had your end of year wrapped? What your most listened to podcasts and songs were? I hope Wake Up to Money made it in there. But do get in touch with us. Tell us what was in there. And do you like these wrapped? Do they help you, learn more about your listening habits? I mean, that's what Spotify would like to tell us they do. In reality, doesn't it just show how much data these big tech companies are hoovering up on us? Remember, you can get in touch with us on that or absolutely anything else you hear in the programme in all the usual ways. Our text number is 85058. We are 08085 909 693 on the WhatsApp, and we're hashtag Wake Up to Money across BBC Sounds. Carlene Jackson, the CEO at Cloud9 Insight, for a company based in Brighton, cloud computing firm, is going to be with us on the programme this morning, as is Zoe Gillespie, investment manager at RBC Brewin Dolphin in Glasgow. They're going to be our panel for this morning here on Wake Up to Money. So do make yourself comfortable. Cold outside, get the kettle on. Plenty to get through the next hour. We're going to kick off talking, as you might have just heard in the news headlines there, about smart meters. Extraordinary story, because smart meters were hailed as easy to use and budget friendly, the kind of hassle-free meter reading, I guess. Well, now, new data that the BBC seen showing that millions of us have been let down by them. Almost 3 million smart meters in Britain still not working properly, leading to incorrect readings and overcharging in some cases, as the BBC's Alex Hatterston has been finding out.
A smart meter should show you in near real time how much energy you're using and what it costs. Most will send that important billing information to energy suppliers through a national network. Some use a local one. But around 2.7 million smart meters have been struggling to connect to a network and so can't send timely billing information. This means your supplier might estimate how much money you've used, and you can end up paying too much or too little. Mum of two, Paula, lives in East Yorkshire. She says she's had problems with her smart meter from day one. There were constant issues with the readings, which led to her being told she was nearly £1,000 in debt. Her supplier, EDF, twice took lump sums out of her bank account, she says, without warning.
It was on a Friday and it was the weekend, so I couldn't get food, petrol, nothing, because they'd completely cleared my account out. It was an error, so they put it back into my account on the Monday, but one of the times it took 7 days. So that's a whole week with, no money.
EDF Energy said it was sorry to hear about the problems and acknowledged it fell short in finding a solution for the issues faced. It said it tried to solve the issues remotely and then set up an appointment but still couldn't receive meter reads due to further technical issues which could not be resolved. Charlene Peppard from Doncaster asked for a smart meter as a high-energy household. She has 11 children and a 12th on the way. At first it worked well, helping her budget her energy use. But she was told after about 18 months that her gas and electricity meters weren't compatible with each other. In theory, if you're paying estimated bills, they should even out once you send your energy company manual meter readings. But without that, Charlene's been left guessing what she owes. Her direct payments were recalculated from around £200 a month to just £2 a month.
I've been able to do absolutely nothing. We've been helpless. Initially, I could take manual reads, which was giving me some idea of what I was using. But then all the screens on my smart meters have just stopped working altogether now. And so all I'm having to do is kind of guesstimate what each appliance is using.
Charlene's also an EDF customer. The company has apologised and said it's booked another appointment with her to try to fix the problem. The regulator Ofgem and UK Energy, the trade association, say the onus is on energy companies to look into smart meter issues quickly and to put billing errors right as soon as possible. The government says the majority of smart meters are modernising energy for millions. It says a small portion are suffering from technical issues, but it's working to fix this.
That's the BBC. That's the BBC's Alex Hattenston that reporting there. Zoe, these were morning, by the way.
Good morning.
These were, as we were saying in the introduction there, I guess hailed as like the way that people could get better grip on their costs, a better grip on what they were spending on their energy, particularly at the time that we've been in. This is an extraordinary PR blow, if nothing else.
Well, definitely. And I think for customers, I think it's also a massive confidence loser for them because, as you say, they were potentially looking at this to try and control energy. And at the moment, we've all seen energy costs being really expensive in the last couple of years. So if these smart meters are not working or giving inaccurate data, which is causing people to have to take money from bank accounts to cover unnecessary bills, then it's a real worry for the consumer too. So yeah, I think it's certainly something that is a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Carlene Jackson, CEO of Cloud9 Insight in Brighton, also with us. Morning, Carlene.
Good morning.
How are you doing? I know we've had some gremlins this morning on the line, so I hope you're hearing me loud and clear.
Yeah, the technical issues are underway, but that's life.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
All, it's just rain here. I wouldn't mind some snow, actually.
Yeah, it's absolutely pouring on my way into the studios this morning as well. Great big puddles forming as I was heading in. Smart meters. Are you a user of one, first of all, by the way?
We used to have one that was working. We don't. It was interesting listening to your program there, but we actually had to chase up our energy supplier Octopus because they hadn't billed us for about 5 months, and it all adds up, doesn't it? So I think there's definitely some issues there. They should surely have some technology that tells them when they haven't billed a client for a while and that there's some potentially some jet accruing there.
Just in a pure sort of personal sense, Carlene, why did you decide to get one? Because no one's forced to have a smart meter, are they? What did you think the benefits might be when you thought, you know what, we should get one of these in the house?
Well, it is great to be able to monitor what is it that's actually driving consumption and at what periods of time is there a particular demand on consumption, and whether is it the washing machine. I think it can be quite naive about which appliances use the most amount of electricity. I used to actually live in France, and one thing that always baffled me is if you had more than 2 big appliances, such as an oven and a washing machine going on at the same time, the power would actually cut out and you'd have to go and trip the switch again because they have a different system in France. And I was amazed by how much these devices actually consume.
Yeah, absolutely incredible, isn't it? The toaster. My mum and dad have got one, and whenever the toaster goes on, you watch it like zoom up. So you think from a business point of view too, though, for the energy companies, knowing exactly, rather than these sort of, which they are basically meter readings, kind of bordering on guesstimates, aren't they? People and relying on people to fill them in. These are actually kind of good bits for their business model, knowing exactly how much we're using at given times, perhaps putting more supply on for those times when they know that we're using the kettle, the washing machine, as Carlene says, all that kind of stuff. So you'd think it would be in their interest to sort of get a grip of this issue.
Yeah, absolutely, because I think the more information and data they've got, as you say, about usage, times, strains on the grid, and also billing it, then it's going to help people, I think, and certainly help companies too. So, I mean, what I tend to use as well, I think more recently, I've got a smart meter, but I also submit readings just to make sure they're accurate, because I've maybe lost a bit of confidence. So download the app and you put in your meter readings once a month just to make sure, because I think, like anybody, you don't want the big bill coming through, and if you don't think your smart meter is 100%, then you're maybe concerned about that.
No, absolutely. I think, and you're definitely not alone in that. I remember there's an article that I've just pulled up here from a month or so ago. UK ministers have failed to convince public on the benefit of smart meters. That was the Public Accounts Committee in Parliament saying just that. What do you think, Zoe? Is it sort of better information in those things? I mean, they've all got apps and websites as well as sort of traditional ways of getting in touch with us. Is it a bit more kind of clarity on that, how they're measuring it, what we're doing, and like you say, perhaps doing both from our end, I guess, doing traditional meter readings and having a smart meter, not either or?
I think it's good. I mean, for me, I think like anything, the smart meter is quite good to educate my usage and what was using more than you weren't. And I think it made me probably more conscious when you come out of a room, you turn the light off, do all the small things where you weren't burning electricity unnecessarily or just have the heating on. So I think from an educational piece for individuals for their bills, when especially when they've got more expensive, they're good, but they've got to work and you've got to have confidence in it. So I think it's getting the balance right for the consumer and the company. Yeah,
really interesting story. There's going to be plenty more of it on the BBC across the day. And I know we were talking about it when we had Kevin Peachy on the programme on Thursday talking Wren. But do check out the Tackling It Together section of the BBC Business pages on the website. Lots of tips around all sorts of things, particularly around energy usage, keeping track of your energy bills. I know a lot of people's concerns this winter, so do check those out if you are one of those who want a bit more information. Give us a sense, Carlene, of how things are going at the moment at Cloud9 again, because we're going to be talking to the Resolution Foundation, the think tank, a little bit later on about all kinds of things, productivity, investment, that kind of thing. Big areas, big companies like yours, I guess the government, particularly in the autumn statement, was hoping to please with what it was rolling out, encourage, I guess, for the year ahead that the investment kind of picture might be less bleak than it has been. What is the kind of lie of the land as you see it at the moment?
So it's actually been our end of year is end of December, so it's been a pretty good end of year, and the forecast looking into next year is looking good. We've just actually moved office in the last week. We've opened up a new office in Brighton, which is double the size. So our confidence is good. But at the end of the day, the projects that we implement, the technology projects that we implement for our clients, rely on confidence of our clients and the confidence in being able to access capital and money, and interest rates are still higher than they have been. So it's not that easy to get access to money as well. Your business has to be in a very healthy state. So we're going into the new year with that in mind. So hopefully confidence in the customers that we deal with, which is in the small and medium-sized businesses, will remain in the sort of moderate state at least, because there's not loads to be happy about. The sort of market's not taking off or whatever. And the good side of things is it's easier to tap into talent. And in the technology sector, there's always a shortage of talent. But at the minute, we're definitely finding it easier, as certainly a lot of the bigger companies are shedding people from their workforce, and so that makes it a good news story for us to be able to find talent at this time.
Loads on the programme last week, Carlene, around productivity and sort of, I guess, going right back to basics, kind of explaining really what's kind of meant by that when it's crunched in the numbers. In terms of increasing productivity at Cloud9, the types of things that the government was talking about, and investing in tech, all that, keeping tech up to date, software, all that kind of stuff. I mean, are you flat out doing all of those things at the moment, or is it realistic that companies like yours could be finding those sort of incremental gains, I guess?
I would say that there's plenty of opportunity for increase in productivity. If you look at some of the reports that have been done out there across Europe, the UK remains one of the lowest levels of productivity relative to, say, Germany and France and other markets. And I don't know whether that's a cultural thing, but definitely leveraging technology and things like AI. Microsoft have recently launched Copilot, and that their AI will help in my opinion, revolutionise how people do things. You'll be able to get a lot more done. But I think that there's still a lot more that can be done. Certainly in the groups of CEOs that I meet with, productivity is one of the top things on their agenda to drive. And the answer is not always hiring more people. It's doing more with less people.
Yeah, more with less. Zoe, what was your kind of sort of take on some of the sort of productivity debates in the last few weeks?
It has been AI. I think if you actually look at it, it's Heul is going to be the generator of productivity, and I think certainly it's how that's going to be implemented in the next few years, and how we're going to see that change. I think the environment for different skills being brought in, and trying to deal with more, as you say, changing how we do things, changing processes, and how we can change things for the better. So I think that's going to be the big takeaway, and certainly has driven from my side a lot that's been happening in the sort of financial markets. A lot of the story this year and the narrative has been around AI and the benefits going forward. And it's been a huge thing.
There's so much fear kind of around that, isn't it? Because we have big conferences about the security and stuff on it, but actually there isn't quite the focus on that element of it sometimes, and actually it might help us do our jobs more efficiently, get rid of some of the tasks that we think, oh my God, I've got to do that, and it's going to take me forever to do this very tedious menial task, and actually focus on using our brains a bit better, even in kind of sort of service industries.
Definitely, and I think there's this fear that it's going to take over the human world and it's going to replace humans, and I think that misconception has put the fear into things. But I think the same was with the internet when it was launched. It was all the big unknown always has that fear factor, but I don't think people see the benefits and how it could help, and it's being used just now. And interestingly, I think we have to sort of see where in a population that's changing and demographics and size, how it works and replaces and helps, as you say, get rid of some of the menial tasks.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to talk much more about that, and also how the impact on kind of living standards of all of these sort of big economic ideas with the Resolution Foundation think tank in the second half of the programme. I'm sure, Zoe, anybody who was trying to get on the railways over the weekend will be well aware. Strikes, of course, kicked off again from the weekend, and we're going to get them all week. In terms of zoom out on the kind of away from the nitty gritty of the argument, because I know that's not necessarily your area of expertise, trade union disputes, but the impact on the economy, we do see this in the ONS's numbers quite a bit, don't we? And so I guess a shudder in terms of that productivity and growth picture for the government.
Definitely. We've seen it. Yeah, as you say, we've had data coming out and we've seen GDP numbers have been impacted when there has been strikes. And it is because if you're now coming into the busiest time for shoppers. You're now coming into Christmas party or festive party season. You're now starting to see if you're not able to have a public transport system that's going to be functional on certain days, then it can impact on people's ability to do things. So these things have a knock-on effect on the economy. And I think certainly coming into December, it'll be interesting to see when we get data through what it's going to have. Certainly on the kind of financial side of the economy too. But yes, certainly a disruption for anybody trying to do this busy time of year.
Yeah, Carlene, I bet Brighton in particular, great destination for people to want to go, have a trip, have a long weekend, do some shopping, stay. Imagine nervousness from a lot of everybody from hospitality to shops with you.
100%. But also Brighton is also a big commuter zone for people trying to get to London. And certainly last week, in fact, I was due up in London. I managed to get to London on Friday, and the night before I just thought I'd check out my trains for the next day, and it was a sea of rail disruptions. And I thought, what, again? So I nervously arrived at the train station earlier than I needed to make sure I got to London. And definitely there were fewer trains coming home as well. But it must be really, really upsetting for people running events that they have to plan well ahead of time, and they don't have any sight of potential disruptions for people getting into London, for example. And Brighton already has a parking challenge and traffic challenge. So the last thing we want is more cars on the road.
Carlene, that's a really important point that you make there about even just your lost day's work, I guess, delayed day's work going into London. Because when we talk about the big figures, as Zoe was, like putting the kind of overarching numbers that the ONS says, X number of days were lost to strikes, it's all of those little ones adding up, isn't it? That you then have to do that again another day. If it's postponed or cancelled a meeting, whatever it is you've got to do, you reschedule it, and it's another day out of your schedule that you could be doing something else. Comes back to that kind of productivity conversation we were having.
Absolutely, yeah. There's an opportunity cost. Maybe there was meetings or client meetings or conferences and connections that were going to happen that didn't. So it's an unquantifiable loss in a way.
And yet still, of course, the government finances Zoe is why I guess that there's going to be this tension between them and ASLEF, the trade union, going forward still here. Don't want to be seen to be doing something that they would claim as inflationary, but also I've still got a number of pay disputes out with plenty of other public sector workers all around the UK as well.
I think this is a story that will continue into 2024, though, until there is some sort of resolution. But you're right, in the interim, though, the knock-on effects are, the longer this goes on, it does have an impact on the economy, it does have an impact on people, and especially now, this is the busiest time for a lot of businesses coming into the sort of festive period, and if people miss out on this, it can have an impact on businesses and their survival rates going into 2024 too. So I think there's a lot of other factors going on from these strikes that have, as I said, much bigger ramifications for the wider economy.
Yeah, certainly one to keep watching, isn't it? And as I've said a few times, it's slightly complicated how the strikes are working this time because it's different ASLEF members on different company lines striking on different days. So I won't run you through them all now because it would take us probably right up until the news to read every single one out, but do keep checking the BBC website. We've got a full breakdown of which line is on strike on which day, so do take yourself there and check those out if you are planning on travelling on the railways this week. Just gone 5:25 on Wake Up to Money. We were expecting a big announcement, a big D-Day, I guess, for the Chinese hit property firm Evergrande, one that's been weighing on the Chinese economy, but looks like it's been kicked into the long grass once again. Nick Marsh, who's been all over this story, covered it inside out, our business correspondent in Singapore, is with us. Nick, morning.
Hi, Will. Morning.
Evergrande, the story that never seems to want to end and never seems to want to go away. It did look like we were going to get a pretty substantial news today, but once again, the can has been kicked down the road, not for the first time.
Not for the first time. Do you want to know how many times it's been kicked down the road?
Anybody want to guess? Zoe, do you want to come in on that? Any guesses? Oh no. Well, I'm going to say 6 or 7.
7. Bang on. Yeah, 7 times in a year and a half. Yeah, so I mean, we were expecting, an outcome for this liquidation hearing in Hong Kong in a Hong Kong court. Actually, last time it got adjourned back in October, the judge Linda Chan said, "Right, this is the last one. This is really, really the last one. You need to come up with a repayment plan, otherwise I'm going to order liquidation." Didn't happen. The next hearing is going to be on the 29th of January, so they've got about a month and a half from now. It's becoming a bit of a saga, really. I mean, the amount of details that we're getting out of the court weren't huge. I mean, we know that the creditors, interestingly, didn't object to an adjournment. So, from that you can infer that they're going to try and get back to the drawing board, come up with this restructuring plan, a way of paying back these debts. Evergrande says that they're going to come up with something in the next 5 weeks, but, we've been here before, so we'll have to see about that.
Nick, worth always taking us right back to the start and just why this company is so important in the wider Chinese economy.
Yeah. Well, so Evergrande, the reason Evergrande is almost like the poster child of this much broader crisis in the Chinese property sector is basically because it owes the most money. It owes over $300 billion. It's one of the world's most indebted companies. And the reason why property matters so specifically in China is because it's a huge part of its economy. It's worth about a quarter of the entire country's GDP. So people in China, very often, they'll invest their money in property. They'll put their life savings into property, So it's a real fundamental part of the economy. Construction, all the associated industries as well, they really drive the Chinese economy as well. But what happened a couple of years ago was that the Chinese government realized that there's a lot of speculation going on in this market. Companies are borrowing billions and billions of dollars. They're borrowing too much, they thought. They didn't want a bubble to come in. So then the government stepped in and said, right, we're going to put limits on how much you can borrow. And all of a sudden, the cash started to dry up for companies like Evergrande, like Country Garden, like loads of other developers. And with no cash, that means you can't finish your projects. So you've got all these unfinished, big, massive housing projects all across China, and people's money's tied up into it. So if Evergrande fails or another big property developer fails, that's a lot of people's money on the line, ordinary people's money on the line. So the Chinese government is treading this fine line where it wants to punish companies for speculating, it wants them to rein their, borrowing in, but at the same time, you can't let a company like Evergrande collapse. Imagine if that happened, which is, to be honest with you, probably why this can is getting kicked down the road so many times at this court in Hong Kong. Technically a foreign court, these are foreign creditors. But, of course, Beijing has influence there in Hong Kong, and the Chinese government would have to, they'd have to green light any kind of liquidation plan anyway.
And Zoe, similarly in terms of just putting people in the picture of why this story matters, just again, the significance and the importance of what's been happening in the Chinese economy and how that's been weighing on the global economy, on everything we do here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everybody thought that the start of the year, the COVID story would come out of China and we would start to see the second biggest economy in the world start to gain traction. And the property sector has been a real feature of, as you say, concern, and it accounts for such a big part of the economy. And if companies like this go under, then it has huge ramifications for the economy and the wider global economy, which again, I think is why they've said they're going to try and delay this restructuring as long as possible to try and get some time, because if it does go under, then if you're losing one of the biggest companies in one of the biggest sectors, then you can't really imagine the ripple effects that's going to happen through the economy and other wider businesses that are connected to it.
And I suppose, Nick, that's the urgency here, that people, those people whose money, their life savings are tied up in this, aren't going to wait around forever for this to be sorted either. So it's not just imperative to try and get the economy going again from a Chinese government perspective, but also, to sort these people out.
Exactly. I mean, it's a political thing, really. I mean, we're not talking about a sort of Western company or a sort of, a company in a fully capitalist sector, which, if there was the equivalent of an Evergrande in the UK or in the US, they'd have gone bust. I mean, there's no doubt about it. The reason that Evergrande is continuing in this kind of zombie-like state is because the Chinese government is helping to prop it up by telling the banks, don't call in your loans, by moving money around the financial system, because they know that if a company like Evergrande goes under, there's lots and lots of unhappy people, and social stability, of course, that is the main aim. That is one of the main aims of the Communist Party. So, we're kind of in this kind of in-between zone now with Evergrande, where you're trying to keep people happy. You don't want frustrations to start bubbling over, but at the same time, you don't want, an industry with such rampant speculation that we've seen in the last few years.
Yeah, really is a fascinating story. Nick, go have a lie down, wait for the can to sort of reach its next point in the road, and then go rushing after it again. Sure, we'll have you back on for round 8 of this story. Great as always to have you on the programme. Nick Marsh, our business correspondent in Singapore, with the latest on Evergrande there. Plenty more to come in the programme. We're going to have loads more from Carlene and from Zoe. We're going to be hearing that report on the Resolution Foundation. And we're also going to be hearing from the boss of Huel. If you've not heard of them before, I'm sure you're going to hear of them soon.
Hi, I'm Rob Burrow, and I've got some exciting news. I'm hosting my own podcast, the first of its kind, presented by someone who speaks using an eye-gazing machine. It's a chance for me to showcase my personality and have some fun. The podcast is called 7 because that's the number I wore on my Leeds Rhino shirt.
Rob Burrow's got the pace. He'll dive underneath the post.
I'll interview 7 sporting legends and ask them 7 questions. And I'm delighted to announce we've got some really big sports stars involved, like the incredible footballer and manager Wayne Rooney. It's going to be great, so make sure you subscribe to my podcast series 7, available on the Total Sport podcast on BBC Sounds.
Wake Up to Money with Will Bain.
Yeah, morning. Welcome back to Wake Up to Money on Monday, the 4th of December. Our panel today, Carlene Jackson, the CEO of Cloud9 Insight, the cloud computing firm in Brighton. Zoe Gillespie, investment manager at RBC Brewin Dolphin in Glasgow with us. Your text still coming in from the first half of the programme, and I think a very fair critique from Andy in Northumberland saying, how can you praise AI 1 minute and then tell us about all the problems energy companies are having with their smart meters? I think in a nutshell, Andy, you've kind of You've hit it on the head to mash two cliches together there, haven't you? That is both the concern and I guess the hope for that particular piece of technology. Do keep your texts coming in. 85058 is the text number. 08085 909 693 is our WhatsApp number. As I mentioned in the first half of the programme, Britain's economic stagnation and the big question of what on earth to do about it has been a major talking point ever since really the autumn statement, where a lot of those measures were highlighted to try and do something about some of it. New research this morning has found that workers in the UK have an £8,300 living standards gap in comparison with peers in France and Germany, fuelled by that slow growth and increasing inequality. The Economy 2030 inquiry is a joint project between the Resolution Foundation and the London School of Economics. Lindsay Judge is a research director at the Resolution Foundation and joins us now. Lindsay, morning. Thanks for coming on Wake Up to Money.
Good morning.
Talk us through the headlines then, first of all.
Well, the starting point is to recognise that Britain has huge strengths. So think about our world-class universities or cutting-edge pharmaceutical industries, for example. But for the last 15 years or so, we've been in relative decline. And what that means is that our productivity growth in our economy has been around about half of what we see in other advanced economies. And as you said in your headline, that has real implications for us all, because it means that wages are suppressed. It means that we don't have so much money for public services, and we all feel worse off as a result.
And this is a pretty significant piece of work as well. You haven't just been looking at this in the last few months. This is over several years, right?
Yeah, it's been 2.5 years of work, as you say. It's been a great collaboration with the London School of Economics. We've roamed far and wide and thought about all kinds of aspects of the economy.
Right, some of those aspects then, let's get into them. Easier said than done, right? Otherwise someone would have done something about this. But as you saw it, as you found it in the report, talk us through what you think some of the challenges, the hurdles are right now that are dragging down that growth picture.
Well, I mean, number one on growth really is our failure to invest over time. We've really sort of lived off our past for a long time. Over the past 4 decades, the UK's had the lowest investment of any G7 country. That statistic sort of tells you in itself all the problems that we have. And that, of course, has real implications for productivity, and that feeds through to wages, and that feeds through to incomes, and that feeds through to tax. So all of these things kind of are circular, but without getting our investment up, we will have major problems in the future as well.
And when you talk about investment, Lindsay, I think a lot of people listening at home will automatically think of stuff, but you mean in everything, in people, in training, in new software, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is stuff. It is things like trains in cities to enable workers to get to the central business districts more easily. But it is also things like investing in training and our human capital. That's so important in the UK. But it's also investing in things like technologies, like, kind of ways that we share information and those types of things. All of those things together are part of the kind of productivity package that we need to boost in the UK.
If I can, Lindsay, before we come to some of the sort of potential solutions, I guess, just want to bring our panel in here as well, because we were touching on this in the first half of the programme when we were kind of trailing. We were going to talk about your report. Carlene, you were speaking to exactly some of the things, I guess, that Lindsay and her team had found.
Yeah, one of the things that I found fascinating was when the pandemic hit, how many people couldn't work from home. The technology they had access to really sort of limited them to be only in an office location. Of course, that has changed, but there's still some parts of the industry. I often see it in manufacturing, for example, that really lag behind, and maybe they've been family businesses, very traditional for years and years, and they don't possibly comprehend how much of an advantage investing in technology could help them automate a lot of their business. And technology it continues to accelerate at quite a pace, and those organizations that are adopting cloud technology and technology, AI related technology, will definitely be at an advantage, because a lot more can be automated. You don't always, as I said earlier, you don't always need more people. Sometimes you just have to be smarter about how you're doing things in your business.
I mean, do you find that a challenge, Carlene, when you're talking to people about your cloud services? Is that still a challenge? Is it really that people still don't understand this, or do understand it but don't see how useful it could be? Or
yeah, I think it's still a challenge. It's amazing how many businesses, even big ones, run off a spreadsheet. It's just quite incredible how you're making decisions, how you're controlling what's happening in your business off the back of a spreadsheet. Rather than leveraging integrated technology, because there's a lot of silos of technology in businesses today. And so a lot of organisations, they feel that they need technology to, you could say, to sort of capture a mass data or a mass of what's happening in their business, but they're not thinking about the bigger picture of, well, where are all the silos of data and how can we automate things? So the customer experience is often let down. So when you call an energy company, do they really have access to a true picture about you and their interactions with you? I think there's a lot more that can be done.
Lindsay, give us a sense about, I mean, was that the type of thing you were finding as well? And if so, why is that? Presumably it's obviously not malicious, is it? It's obviously not people going in with a thought going, you know what, I don't like any of this technology stuff. Is it purely down to money and fearing how much it's going to cost them? Or?
Well, I think it's another thing too, which is the kind of lack of policy certainty that lots of businesses have faced over a long period of time, not just in the last couple of tumultuous years. And that, of course, is terrible for businesses. I'm sure all your panel will speak to that point, that what businesses really crave and really need in order to invest strategically is certainty. But there's another point, I think, around automation, which is when we look at the figures, economic change in the UK has actually slowed down over the last 15 years and not sped up. We think of it as being a rather kind of chaotic few years, but it hasn't been at all. And that's a real problem. And we need to make sure that good firms are able to grow and bad firms shrink over time through competitive pressures. And one suggestion we have, for example, is you can have tax advantages, not for small firms, but for young firms, to enable the kind of those at the cutting edge to really flourish.
Zoe, something we talk about a lot, and I know all of your colleagues who kind of play the role of our investors on a morning here on Wake Up to Money talk about exactly what Lindsay was just saying, that certainty, the changing of ideas. In fact, often when we have people in Carlene's role as well, people who own and run their own business, particularly if they're in manufacturing or construction or something like that, call for things like an overarching strategy, an industrial strategy. How difficult has the uncertainty been for, big investment funds like yours to want to invest in big UK projects?
Oh, absolutely. I think you have to look for any investment. You're looking for a timeline and how it's going to play out. And if there's any uncertainty, then it makes a project or any investment look less appealing. So you do need that. You do need visibility. You do need certainty. I think financial stability as well. And I think like everything, the one takeaway I've got from that, which was quite interesting, is the fact that economic change has slowed in this country, which from an investment perspective is quite a sad thing, because it's then feeding through to every aspect of it. When you're really looking for something that's appealing to investors, that you're going to get some, I think, momentum behind it. And if we're not seeing that, then it's less appealing to buy into the story.
And I do really want to pick through some of the solutions, Lindsay, and you touched on some of them there. But just give us a little on what you found around wages too, because that was obviously extremely interesting as well, as we were flagging up in the headline there.
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, underlying general wage growth is our need to boost productivity, which we've already been talking about around investment. But the other feature that we note of the UK economy is that we're one of the most unequal countries in Europe, and we need to do better if we want to help those on lower middle income. So, for example, one of the things we talk about in the report is the minimum wage. Now, the minimum wage is a huge policy success story. We really shouldn't kind of knock that, but we think there's further to go on the minimum wage, which is so important for helping those on low incomes.
And in terms of tax as well, something that we haven't, that we thought might be looked at in the autumn statement that wasn't talked about in terms of the thresholds for some of those lower earners as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thresholds for income tax at the moment are frozen, and that means that over time we're all sort of pulled further up the distribution. Economists call it fiscal drag. And that means that although we may be getting a kind of break in terms of national insurance cuts from the autumn statement, over time that fiscal drag kind of cancels them out, and that means that people on lower incomes and higher incomes indeed are getting worse off.
Yeah, so those, not just those sort of tax changes that you were talking about for kind of smaller firms, but potentially tinkering with personal taxation too. Give us a few more kind of solutions, Lindsay, before we let you go. What would you like to see? What would you hope to see kind of taken away from your report?
Well, I think one of the really important things is that we need to focus on things that we're good at in the UK, and fundamentally that's services. So Britain is actually the second biggest exporter of services in the world behind the US, and we need to lean into our strengths rather than kind of pretend that we're a different type of nation. And one of the things that means is that we've got to invest in our second cities. We've got to invest in Manchester, we've got to invest in Birmingham, we've got to invest in Leeds, because those are the places where cities will cluster. And if we don't do that, then that means we'll be a poorer nation. And of course, those places will be poorer too, and the levelling up rhetoric will never be delivered on.
Carlene, that was something you touched on in the first half of the programme too.
Absolutely. I think we also need to, I think for me, I see that the younger generation coming out of uni, I've got a 21-year-old at uni, and she reports that there's less graduate schemes available, so there's less opportunity for graduates coming out. So I think that we owe it to the younger generation to, as employers, to give them a great opportunity to get jobs and to pay them a fair wage, not just a living wage, but a fair wage.
Zoe, give us your sense of all we've heard from Lindsay.
I think the thing about levelling up is true. I think you have to get other cities involved. I do agree with that. And I think I even look at up in Scotland. I think that are we getting and keeping the best talent here? We've got fantastic universities, but I think we're seeing less potential job opportunities coming through. And I think there's always been the call to London. But I think we should actually try and get, as you say, build the service economy and try and build it back into these cities, these great cities that we've got in the UK, and try and balance it out more. How you do that, I don't know, but I think it would certainly help boost the economy throughout the country.
I know that is an issue that we're certainly going to be talking about right early on in the new year and up to Christmas here on Wake Up to Money. Certainly something we're looking at working up something a little bit bigger around. So I'm sure we'll have you all back on to chat about that when we do get to it. Really fascinating report, Lindsay. Thanks for coming on and breaking it all down for us. Lindsay Judge, Research Director at the Resolution Foundation there. Should probably say as well, we did contact the Treasury around some of those, the Resolution Foundation's findings around earnings. An HMT spokesperson told us we have halved the number of people on low pay with increases to the national living wage. And thanks to above inflation increase to tax allowances, we have also saved the average earner over £1,000 a year since 2010. The OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, expects the measures in the autumn statement will deliver the largest boost to potential growth on record. And with inflation now falling, we are taking the long-term decisions needed for growth. Have you heard of Huel? Are you a user of Huel? Are you, like me, some of our friends, almost religiously fervent in your conversion to Huel? It's the meal replacement subsidy, I guess meal replacement subsidy drinks, foods. Well, anyway, James McMartyr, their CEO, will explain much better. We were speaking to him a little earlier last week.
We started off with Huel.com, which is quite rare for a food and drink brand to be 100% of sales on its own website. And UK was the first market. We went international very quickly, which is much easier to do for a direct consumer brand. So we went into Germany and the US after year 2. And subsequently, we've gone into places like Sweden and Japan and other parts of Europe to move us forward. And growth has been phenomenal through that channel. And we started off with a powder, and you mix the powder with water to create a drink. And we've since really widened the range where we now have a ready-to-drink bottle, which is what you will often see in the stores. We've managed to grow through new product ranges. And then also we have a growing retail channel. So in the UK, you'll see us in about 40 to 50% of UK stores will have some Huel bottles in there. So it's been quite tough juggling all those different avenues, which has led to the hyper growth. But it's been a lot of fun, and we've got a great team around the world of about 300 people now across 6 different offices.
A company growing as fast as yours, James, obviously often extremely attractive to investors. Yet you've decided so far an IPO floating on a stock exchange not for you so far. Why?
So we did consider it. We looked at it for early 2022, which is probably the worst possible timing because the few months after that, the market basically had died, and IPO markets have effectively been shut for the best part of 2 years. So hence we did our investment round last year to bring in 20 million more. And that's allowed us to invest in our own factory and have the cash for the stock to continue to grow. We are in a pretty fortunate position. We don't need to do anything. As you say, it's flattering. People like to talk about us and what we might do for the future. We have investors who have been around for 5 years. We've also got share options for the majority of staff. So at some stage, we will need to do something to evolve that. But right now, there's no hurry to do anything. And we will just be open-minded about whether it's an IPO, whether it's a partnership with a larger player, and see how things progress.
In terms of that kind of future, James, do you see it still as being dominated in the UK, or do you think, given the size of UR and the size of the markets that you're in, that perhaps your focus will have to shift away from the UK a bit?
We're trying to do both, actually. So the UK will become more of a household name. It's really hard for me to get a feeling for that because I'm so on the inside. But back in the day when I used to say, what do? I'd talk about the product and then mention the brand name, assuming they hadn't heard of it. But now more people know the name Huel, and that's a sign. I think also being in so many stores has helped us, and our retail sales are absolutely flying. We're one of the fastest growing companies there is in retail right now.
What do you see as the challenges ahead? I guess this inflation picture that we still have with us is one, because, as you say, you're trying to be as competitive as you can on price, but it's still not a cheap product. I guess, is that one of the challenges ahead for the coming year in terms of that growth?
Sure. We've been quite strong, actually, on protecting the price level to not have such an impact. So we've only increased prices twice in the 8 years since the business was started. And for instance, our bottles in the shop, we launched at £3.50 4 years ago, and it's still £3.50, where a lot of people around us have pushed prices up. I think that's probably helped us, because my worry initially was, were we that affordable? We're great value for a meal, but actually if you put us next to, let's say, a milkshake, we look more expensive. That gap has widened. That gap has narrowed, and we've also seen things like meal deals become more expensive.
Do you speak to some of the supermarkets about that, about where your product's placed? Is that a debate you get to have with them, whether you go with the drinks or with like you say, next to the packaged sandwiches or whatever?
We do. It's a really, really hard challenge. Actually, in the UK, often we're sat with dairy, and obviously we're not dairy, but you see that a lot. So we're either with other drinks that might be considered protein shakes or milk-based drinks. We often sit with sandwiches as well. The data says that we perform well when we sat next to these sandwiches, because a Huel drink is an alternative to a sandwich. And then you see it in different parts of the world. So Germany, we're not with those drinks, we're with long life milk, because that's where the category is. So it's very difficult when you have a new category, and we'd probably call it complete food or complete nutrition. Where do you sit? And there's about 4 or 5 different places in the supermarket, and the way it works with retail is that a buyer makes a decision on behalf of their category. So often you have competing buyers and a large retailer saying, I want Huel in my category. So
it sounds like it's sort of an ongoing kind of education, lobbying kind of effort.
Yeah, and even we've got some new bars, some complete nutrition bars we launched last month, and we're talking to retailers now about where does that go. It could easily sit in kind of confectionery. It could sit in the checkout walk as you're about to pay. It could sit in sort of sports nutrition, which we're not a sports brand, but that's where a lot of bars are. So but
it affects sales, you were saying, depending on where it is, though.
It does, yeah, it does affect sales, because obviously you want the highest footfall possible to be there. But and also it's difficult for us is, if you ask a customer where would Huel be in a store, they might all give you different answers. So it's a challenge for a retailer, challenge for us, but overall we're doing really well. So it's a nice problem to have.
James McMaster, Chief Executive at Huel. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you.
Either of you users, Zoe, Carlene?
I'm no, but I'm probably going to end up buying it, because I'm one of these people that will try everything that I see. And now that I know this, I will not be able to walk past it. But it's got my name written all over it, so I can guarantee within the next week it will find its way into my shopping trolley.
Carlene?
I have tried the chocolate one. I'm a chocoholic. However, I live to eat and cook, so it's not really for me. I'm
kind of with you. I do see it kicking around, and you see lots of people sort of on the train or whatever drinking it. Certainly seems like a big move. I thought that bit, Carlene, was fascinating as well, but just where where it's compared to, I guess. When it's next to sandwiches, people think, oh, I'm making a healthier choice. When it's next to other fizzy drinks, they kind of weird what our psychology is, isn't it, in the shop?
Yeah, in the UK we have a huge milk section, and when I lived in France it was tiny. So maybe it would do quite well in countries where there isn't so much milk sold. It would really stand out, but it would be lost in a sea of milk.
I have a French wife, Carlene, and I think she would be even more fervent, and the French people even more fervent in there that this doesn't count as food and cooking. But maybe we could give it a whirl and see how the experiment goes. 5:55 here on Wake Up to Money. Now, some of you will have heard this on Spotify recently.
Oh, hi. This is a special message from me to you. Basically a thank you note. Honestly, it looks like you listened to a lot of my music this year. Doesn't matter which era you were listening to, I'm very, very grateful to be on your Spotify Wrapped.
Taylor Swift, the most streamed artist of the year on the streaming app, should be on many of your Wrapped lists. The breakdown of what each subscriber has been listening to this year. Will Page, former chief economist at Spotify and author of Pivot, 8 Principles of Transforming Your Business in Time of Disruption, is with us. Will, morning.
Good morning.
Wrapped, bit of fun, or is there more use for it for Spotify, I guess, first of all?
It's much bigger than a bit of fun. It's a case of the band is now being surpassed by the brand. If you think about radio, where we would listen to all sing hong on the breakfast radio show and talk about it at a water cooler at 10 a.m., those days are gone. Now we have our own unique playlists, our own unique Discover Weeklies. So we can't share music like we used to. So we share the musical experience, and that's what Spotify Wrapped is.
So it's a huge amount of our data as well, I guess, for the company too, in terms of knowing what next to kind of pitch our way, I suppose, to keep us listening.
Absolutely. It's self-reinforcing. And it's not just a huge amount of data. It produces charts that are far more relevant than the charts of the past. So I challenge you, Will, from Will to Will. Can you tell me who was number one last week?
Was it... well, I was going to say, is Fairy Tale of New York back at number one yet, or is that making its move?
You can't tell me who's number one of your Wrapped. So if you think about charts, what do charts do? They make the popular visible and the visible more popular. And that's what Wrapped is doing with a modern type of chart.
Is there a case, Will, that it, and you tell me from being inside Spotify, but that is it not bad news for the company if we sort of shrink down the number of artists we're listening to? Or does it not matter really at all, and from the company's perspective? Because doesn't this sort of encourage that in a way? If you're sharing with your friends that you're listening to loads and loads of Taylor Swift and you listen to hours and hours and hours of it and only Taylor Swift, doesn't that make people sort of, I guess, want to be like their friends, right? Like compete with them?
You'd think, but I think it goes differently. Radio was one to many. One radio DJ played to 8 million listeners on the BBC Two breakfast show. Now you've got, I would guess, 22 million people in Spotify users in the UK, all listening to different stuff. So it's many one-to-ones, and they're sharing those many one-to-one experiences.
Anybody want to admit what was top of their Wrapped, Zoe?
Do you know something? I wouldn't actually know. No. That's the thing. I think I'm quite a random listener. I think it's just, so I don't know if that's just maybe I'm
You're beating the algorithm.
Yeah, I think so.
Carlene?
Oh, for me, it was actually Jack Johnson. I'm a major sort of lover of skiing.
Wow, you've gone back, and yeah, that's a real throwback.
Yeah, I ski a lot in Canada. In fact, I'm going there Friday, and so
Very
for
nice.
me, every cafe you go to is Jack Johnson. I just want to get in that
Jack
Johnson mood.
Will, quick one.
My Wrapped has been the same every year for the 8 years it's been built, which is in excess. I don't change much.
Well, there you go. That would be a good track to start the morning, bit like Dot there. Brilliant thanks to Will Page, former Spotify boss. Big thanks to Carlene Jackson and Zoe Gillespie too.
My name's Joe Wilkinson and I'm doing a podcast because I love football. But what I love more is the idea of being friends with a professional footballer. The footballer I'd like to be friends with is Patrick Bamford. Hello, Patrick. Will you be my friend?
That's yet to be decided.
OK, not what I was hoping.
My Mate's a Footballer is a new BBC Sounds podcast with me, Patrick Bamford, and Joe Wilkinson.
Some days he'll hate it, other days he won't, and eventually he will fall in love with me.
Search for My Mate's a Footballer on BBC Sounds.